Danielle Washington looked out of the window of her new office on the 5th floor. The city of Riverside spread out before her, busy and alive in the late afternoon sun. She was 34 years old, and as of today, she was the youngest chief of internal affairs in the history of the Riverside Police Department. She turned away from the window and walked across the empty office to her desk. A small box with her personal items sat unopened. She hadn't had time to make this space her own yet. The walls were bare except for the city seal and a framed copy of the police oath. The desk was clean and empty, waiting for her to fill it with work. Danielle sat down in her chair and opened the folder in front of her. Inside were the files of every officer in the department. She had a big job ahead of her. The governor had personally asked her to come to Riverside. The police department here had problems, big ones. In the last 3 years, there had been 27 complaints of excessive force against Black and Hispanic citizens. None of those complaints had led to any serious punishment for the officers involved. "We need someone from outside," the governor had told her during their private meeting last month. "Someone who isn't afraid to make hard choices. Someone who will do what's right, not what's easy." Danielle had built her career on doing what was right. In Atlanta, she had led investigations that ended with 3 high-ranking officers losing their jobs and facing criminal charges. Her work wasn't popular, but it was necessary. That's why the governor's special task force on police reform had picked her for this job. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Sam Porter, the deputy chief of police. "Just checking in to see if you need anything," he said, not stepping fully into the office. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a stiff manner. From their first meeting earlier today, Danielle could tell he wasn't happy about her appointment. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, keeping her voice friendly but professional. "The official announcement about your position won't go out until next Monday," Porter said. "The chief thought you might want some time to get settled before the media circus starts." Danielle nodded. "That was thoughtful. I appreciate the chance to learn more about the department before I'm in the spotlight." Porter gave a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you need anything, my office is down the hall." He turned to leave but stopped. "Just so you know, we handle things a certain way here in Riverside. We're like a family." "I've heard that before," Danielle said calmly. "But even families need rules and accountability." Porter's face hardened slightly. "Have a good evening, Ms. Washington." He closed the door a little too firmly as he left. Danielle let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. This wasn't the first time she had faced resistance. It wouldn't be the last. She returned to the files on her desk, reading officer records and complaint histories until the sun began to set. Around 7 o'clock, she decided it was time to call it a day. She put the files in her desk drawer and locked it. Before leaving, she walked to the bathroom connected to her office to freshen up. The woman in the mirror looked tired but determined. Danielle splashed some cold water on her face and fixed her hair, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "One day at a time," she told her reflection. That's how she would approach this job. One day, one file, one case at a time until things changed. She left through a side entrance of the building. The official parking spot for the chief of internal affairs was right by the main door, but Danielle had parked her personal car, a blue Honda Civic, in the public lot across the street. She wanted to blend in for now, to observe the department without everyone watching her every move. The evening air felt good after being inside all day. Instead of going straight home to her new apartment, Danielle decided to explore downtown Riverside a bit. She wanted to get to know this city, not just as a place she worked, but as a community she would be serving. Riverside had a pretty downtown area with old brick buildings and new shops. There were people out walking, eating at outdoor tables, and enjoying the evening. Danielle stopped at a small cafe and ordered a sandwich to go. While she waited, she watched a family playing in the nearby park. The mother was taking pictures while the father pushed their young daughter on a swing. The little girl's laughter carried across the street. This is why her work mattered, Danielle thought. So that little girl could grow up in a city where she was protected by the police, not threatened by them. With her sandwich in hand, Danielle continued walking. A few blocks from the main street, she found a small jazz club called Blue Note. Music spilled out onto the sidewalk, a saxophone playing, a smooth, mellow tune. Danielle liked jazz. Her father had been a jazz musician, playing in clubs across the country before settling down to teach music at a high school in Detroit, where she grew up. On impulse, she went inside. The club was dimly lit and not too crowded on a Tuesday night. She found a small table near the back and sat down. A waitress came over and Danielle ordered a club soda with lime. She needed to keep a clear head. As she ate her sandwich and listened to the music, Danielle thought about the challenge ahead of her. The Riverside Police Department had about 300 officers. From what she had read so far, most of them were good cops doing a difficult job. But there were problems, serious ones. Racial profiling, excessive force, complaints that disappeared into filing cabinets instead of being properly investigated. Her job was to clean house, to find the officers who abused their power and hold them accountable. It wouldn't make her popular. The blue wall of silence was real and it was strong. Officers protected their own, even when they knew their colleagues were in the wrong. The band finished their set and there was a break in the music. Danielle checked her watch. It was almost 10 o'clock. She should head home and get some rest. Tomorrow would be another long day of reading files and meeting department heads. She left a tip on the table and walked out of the club. The streets were quieter now. Most of the shops were closed and there were fewer people around. Danielle walked back toward the public parking lot where she had left her car. As she turned a corner, she noticed a police car parked outside a convenience store. 2 officers were inside buying coffee. Danielle slowed her pace, watching them. These were her officers now, in a way, part of the department she was tasked with monitoring and improving. The officers came out of the store laughing about something. They didn't notice her standing there. They got into their patrol car and drove away, continuing their night shift. Danielle wondered what kind of officers they were. Were they among the good ones who served with honor? Or were they part of the problem? She would find out soon enough. Every officer in the Riverside Police Department would be evaluated under her watch. She reached her car and drove to her new apartment. It was a simple 1-bedroom place, still half filled with moving boxes. She hadn't had time to fully unpack yet. That would have to wait for the weekend. Danielle took a quick shower and got ready for bed. As she lay down, she thought about all the work ahead of her. The governor had given her 6 months to show real improvement in the department. 6 months to change a culture that had been building for decades. One day at a time, she whispered again in the darkness. Tomorrow, she would continue reviewing files. Next week, after the official announcement, she would start conducting interviews and sit in on roll calls. She would observe the department in action, looking for both problems and potential allies. What Danielle didn't know as she drifted off to sleep was that her evaluation of the Riverside Police Department would begin much sooner than she had planned. And it would start not with her observing officers on duty, but with her becoming the victim of the very behavior she had been hired to stop. 3 days had passed since Danielle Washington arrived in Riverside. She spent most of her time in her office, reading files and making notes. The more she learned about the police department, the more she understood why the governor had called her in. There was a clear pattern of problems that nobody seemed willing to fix. Tonight, Danielle decided to return to the Blue Note Jazz Club. The music helped her think, and she needed a break from the endless files. She wore casual clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, and a light jacket. She didn't want anyone to recognize her as the new chief of internal affairs. Not yet. The club was busier than it had been on Tuesday. A 5-piece band played on the small stage and the tables were mostly full. Danielle found a spot at the bar and ordered her usual club soda with lime. The bartender, an older man with kind eyes, smiled at her. "You were here the other night," he said. "You like jazz?" Danielle nodded. "My father was a jazz musician. I grew up with it." "Well, you came to the right place. Best jazz in Riverside right here at the Blue Note." Danielle smiled and turned to face the band. She let the music wash over her, pushing away thoughts of work for a little while. She stayed for almost 2 hours, listening to the band play 3 full sets. When she finally decided to leave, it was a few minutes past midnight. The streets were quiet now. Most of the shops and restaurants in downtown Riverside closed by 10, even on a Friday night. Danielle walked toward the public parking lot where she had left her car. As she approached the lot, she heard raised voices coming from a side street. She slowed down, listening. Someone was arguing. Then she heard a sound that made her stop. Completely. The hard slam of someone being pushed against a wall. Danielle looked down the side street. In the dim light, she could see 2 police officers and a young black man. The man was pinned against the brick wall of a building. One officer held the man's arms behind his back, while the other stood close, speaking in a low, angry voice. A small group of people stood nearby, watching with worried faces. Danielle's heart beat faster. This was exactly the kind of situation she had been reading about in those complaint files. She took out her phone and started recording as she walked closer. "You fit the description," one of the officers was saying. "Now stop giving us trouble or things will get a lot worse for you." "I didn't do anything," the young man said. His voice shook with fear and anger. "I was just walking to my car. Check my ID. I work at the hospital." "Sure you do," the officer replied with a laugh. He wore a name tag that read, Patterson. One of the bystanders, a woman in her 60s, stepped forward. "He's telling the truth. He's a nurse at Riverside General. I've seen him there." "Ma'am, step back," the second officer warned. His name tag read, Kelly. "This is police business." Danielle was close enough now to see everything clearly. The young man looked terrified. There was no sign that he had done anything wrong. No evidence being collected, no proper procedure being followed. "Excuse me," Danielle said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Is everything okay here?" Officer Patterson turned to look at her, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Ma'am, please, step back. This doesn't concern you." "I'm just concerned about what's happening," Danielle replied. "What has this young man done?" "He matches the description of a robbery suspect," Officer Kelly said without looking at her. His hand rested on his gun. "What description?" Danielle asked. "Can you be more specific?" Patterson turned fully toward her now, his face hard with anger. "I said step back. This is police business." "I understand," Danielle said. "I'm just a concerned citizen. May I ask for your badge numbers, please?" Something changed in Patterson's eyes, a flash of rage that made Danielle take a step back. But she wasn't quick enough. The officer moved forward suddenly and struck her across the face with his open hand. The force of the blow knocked Danielle to the ground. Pain exploded in her, cheek and eye. "Another one who thinks she knows the law better than we do," Patterson growled. "Mind your own business next time." The bystanders gasped. Someone shouted, "You can't do that!" Another person was already on their phone, likely calling 911. Danielle touched her face. Her fingers came away with blood from a cut near her eye. She was stunned, not just by the pain but by how quickly the officer had resorted to violence. "You hit her!" The older woman who had spoken earlier cried out. "She wasn't doing anything wrong." Patterson turned back to the woman. "Do you want to be next? I said this is police business." But something had changed. The small crowd was growing larger as people came out of nearby buildings. More phones were out, recording. Patterson seemed to realize that the situation was getting out of control. He turned to his partner. "Let him go. He's not our guy." Kelly released the young man, who immediately stepped away from the wall, rubbing his wrists where the officer had held him. "Remember what I said," Patterson warned the man. "Stay out of trouble." Then the 2 officers walked quickly back to their patrol car, which was parked around the corner. They drove away, just as the sound of another police siren could be heard. In the distance, the young man hurried over to Danielle, who was still sitting on the ground. "Are you okay? I'm a nurse. Let me look at that cut." His name was Andre Lewis. He had just finished his shift at the hospital and was walking to his car when the officers stopped him. He helped Danielle to her feet and examined the cut above her eye. "You'll need a few stitches," he said. "I can take you to the emergency room." The second police car arrived then. 2 different officers got out. One was a woman named Officer Rivera. She took statements from Danielle, Andre, and several of the bystanders. The other officer, named Diaz, collected the names of everyone who had recorded the incident on their phones. "This is a serious accusation," Officer Rivera said after writing everything down. "Officers Patterson and Kelly are from the North Precinct. I'll need to report this to their sergeant." "Will anything happen to them?" Andre asked. His voice was bitter. "Because this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Not even close." Officer Rivera didn't answer his question directly. "We'll follow procedure," she said. "Ms. Washington, do you need medical attention?" Danielle nodded. Her eye was swelling shut and the cut was still bleeding. "Yes, I think I do." "Do you want us to call an ambulance?" Officer Diaz asked. "No, I can drive her," Andre offered. "I'm headed back to the hospital anyway. I can make sure she gets taken care of." Danielle agreed to go with Andre. As they walked to his car, she was very quiet. Her mind was racing. What she had just experienced was exactly what she had been hired to stop. Officers abusing their power, using excessive force, targeting people based on race, and now she had experienced it firsthand. Andre drove her to Riverside General Hospital. On the way, he told her this wasn't his first bad experience with the police in this city. "But usually they're more careful," he said. "They don't usually hit people when there are witnesses around. Those two must be really sure they won't get in trouble." At the emergency room, a doctor named Frank Jordan cleaned and stitched the cut above Danielle's eye. He gave her an ice pack for the swelling and checked for signs of a concussion. "You're lucky it wasn't worse," Dr. Jordan said. "No concussion, but you'll have quite a bruise for a while." As Danielle sat in the examination room waiting for her discharge papers, her phone rang. It was Mayor Harriet Coleman. "I just heard what happened," the mayor said, her voice tight with anger. "This is exactly why we brought you in. I want those officers suspended immediately." Danielle was surprised. "How did you find out so quickly?" "Videos are already online. Someone recognized you from the press photos we released last week." "Are you okay?" "I'll be fine," Danielle said. She thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Don't suspend them yet." "What?" "Why not?" "I don't want anyone to know who I am. Not yet." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What are you thinking?" the mayor finally asked. "I need to see how deep this goes," Danielle explained. "I want to file a complaint as a regular citizen. I want to see how the department handles it. That will tell me everything I need to know about the current system." The mayor didn't sound convinced. "These officers assaulted you. They should be punished." "They will be," Danielle promised. "But first I need to see if the department would punish them without knowing they hit the new chief of internal affairs. I need to know if the system works at all." After a long silence, the mayor agreed. "Be careful, Danielle. You've just seen how dangerous some of these officers can be." Danielle ended the call and leaned back against the exam table. Her face throbbed with pain, but her determination was stronger than ever. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was personal. Danielle Washington woke up the next morning with a throbbing pain in her face. She went to the bathroom mirror and looked at herself. The area around her left eye was swollen and dark purple. The cut above her eyebrow had 3 small stitches. She looked like she had been in a fight. And in a way, she had been. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat at her small kitchen table. Today was Saturday, so she didn't have to go to the office. That was good. She needed time to think and plan her next steps. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Andre Lewis, the nurse who had helped her last night. He was checking to see if she was okay. Danielle smiled a little as she texted back to thank him. It was nice to know there were good people in this city. After breakfast, Danielle got dressed and drove to the main police station downtown. She was going to file her complaint as a regular citizen. She wore sunglasses to hide the worst of her bruising, but she couldn't hide it completely. The front desk of the police station was busy with people coming and going. Danielle waited in line until it was her turn. The desk sergeant was an older man named Alan Price. He barely looked up as she approached. "How can I help you?" he asked in a bored voice. "I need to file a complaint against an officer," Danielle said. Sergeant Price sighed as if this was the most annoying thing he had heard all day. "Fill this out," he said, sliding a form across the counter. Someone will contact you. How long will that take? Danielle asked. The sergeant shrugged. Hard to say. We're pretty backed up with these things. Is there a copy I can keep for my records? Danielle asked. Sergeant Price looked annoyed but gave her a blank second copy. You can fill them both out. Danielle took the forms and sat down in the waiting area. She filled them out carefully, describing exactly what had happened the night before. She included Officer Patterson's name, the time and location, and the names of witnesses, including Andre Lewis. When she was done, she returned to the front desk. Here you go, she said, handing the completed form to Sergeant Price. When should I expect to hear something? Like I said, we're backed up. Could be a couple weeks, could be longer. Is there someone in Internal Affairs I could speak with directly? Danielle asked. The sergeant laughed a little. Internal Affairs is in transition right now. New chief starting next week, but even if they were fully staffed, they don't take walk-ins. Danielle nodded and took her copy of the form. Thank you for your help, she said, even though he hadn't been very helpful at all. As she was leaving, she noticed a stack of complaint forms on the edge of the desk. She could see that hers was already placed at the bottom of the pile. There were at least 20 other forms in the stack, and from what she could see, most of them had been sitting there for a long time. The dates on the visible forms were from weeks or even months ago. Danielle left the police station feeling angry, but also more determined than ever. The system was clearly broken. Complaints were being ignored, and if this was happening to her, complaint. What about all those other people who had filed forms that were just sitting in a pile? She drove to her office at the Internal Affairs building. Even though it was Saturday, she wanted to look at some files. The security guard at the front desk recognized her and let her in. Danielle went straight to her office and locked the door behind her. She spent the next several hours looking through the official complaint records. What she found was disturbing. In the past year, there had been 142 formal complaints filed against Riverside police officers. Only 11 of those complaints had been fully investigated. The rest were listed as pending or insufficient evidence to proceed. Even worse, there were 17 complaints against Officer Gregory Patterson in the last 3 years. All of them involved excessive force. None of them had led to any disciplinary action. His partner, Officer Vincent Kelly, had 8 complaints. Again, no discipline. Danielle made copies of these records and put them in her briefcase. Then she used her computer to search for news stories about police misconduct in Riverside. There were many articles, but what caught her eye was that the stories almost always ended the same way. Internal Affairs is investigating the incident. But based on the records she had just reviewed, those investigations rarely happened. Her phone rang. It was Andre Lewis again. I was wondering if you filed a complaint, he said when she answered. I did, Danielle replied. This morning. I filed one too, Andre said. About what they did to me. But honestly, I don't expect anything to happen. I've filed complaints before. Nothing happened with those? Danielle asked, even though she already knew the answer. Nothing ever happens, Andre said with a sigh. That's why most people don't even bother anymore, Danielle thought for a moment. Andre, would you be willing to meet me? I'd like to hear more about your experiences. It might help with an article I'm writing. She didn't want to reveal who she really was yet, so she let him assume she was a journalist. Andre agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near the hospital later that afternoon. When they met, Andre told her about 3 separate incidents where he had been stopped by police for no reason. Each time, he had filed a complaint. Each time, nothing had happened. It's not just me, he said. Ask anyone who looks like us in this city. We get stopped, searched, questioned, just for existing. And if we object, things get ugly fast. Danielle listened carefully, taking mental notes. Have you ever spoken to anyone from Internal Affairs? She asked. Andre laughed. I tried once. I called and called. Finally got someone to talk to me. They took notes and said they'd look into it. Never heard back. This matched what Danielle had found in the records. The current Internal Affairs Department was part of the problem. They protected officers instead of holding them accountable. After her meeting with Andre, Danielle drove home. She needed to make a plan for next week. Monday was the official announcement of her position. Everyone in the department would know who she was. She had to be ready. That evening, her doorbell rang. It was Mayor Coleman coming to check on her in person. "My goodness," the mayor said when she saw Danielle's face. "That looks painful." "It is," Danielle admitted, letting the mayor into her apartment. "But it's also useful. It reminds me why I'm here." Mayor Coleman sat down on Danielle's couch. "Have you changed your mind about suspending those officers?" she asked. Danielle shook her head. "No. I need to see this through. I filed my complaint today. I want to see what happens, or doesn't happen, with it. And then what? Then I make changes," Danielle said simply. "Big ones." Mayor Coleman looked worried. "You're going to face a lot of resistance. The police union is strong. The current chief likes things the way they are, and many of the officers will close ranks to protect their own." "I know," Danielle said. "But what choice do we have? People are being hurt. The system is broken. Someone has to fix it." The mayor nodded slowly. "That's why we brought you here. Just be careful. What happened last night was awful, but it could have been worse." After the mayor left, Danielle sat alone in her living room, thinking. Her face hurt. Her heart hurt too, for Andre and all the others who had suffered similar treatment or worse. But her resolve was stronger than ever. On Monday, everyone would know who she was. The real work would begin. She would have to face Officers Patterson and Kelly, knowing what they had done. She would have to reform a department that had been allowed to operate without real oversight for too long. It wouldn't be easy, but as Danielle touched the stitches above her eye, she knew it was necessary. What had happened to her was not unique. It was happening to people in this city every day. The only difference was that she had the power to do something about it. Danielle looked at her reflection in the window. Behind the bruises and swelling, her eyes were clear and determined. She was ready for Monday, ready to begin the real work of making Riverside Police Department accountable to the people it was supposed to protect and serve. Monday morning arrived with rain clouds hanging over Riverside. Danielle Washington stood in front of the mirror in her bathroom, carefully applying makeup to cover the worst of her bruising. It wasn't perfect, but it would do for now. The official announcement of her position as Chief of Internal Affairs was scheduled for 3 p.m. Until then, she wanted to continue her quiet investigation. She arrived at her office early, before most of the other staff. Her plan was to spend the morning reviewing more files and preparing for the afternoon announcement. But first, she wanted to check on her complaint. Danielle logged into the police department's internal system. All complaints were supposed to be entered into this system within 24 hours. She searched for her name but found nothing. She tried searching by the date and location of the incident. Again, nothing. This confirmed what she had suspected. Complaints weren't just being delayed. Some weren't being entered into the system at all. They were disappearing into that stack on Sergeant Price's desk, never to be seen again. Her office phone rang. It was Sam Porter, the Deputy Chief of Police. "Just wanted to remind you about the press conference this afternoon," he said. "Chief, Rogers wants to meet with you beforehand. His office at 2:30. "I'll be there," Danielle said. "By the way, I'm reviewing some old complaint files. I notice a lot of them are marked as pending for months. Is that normal?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Internal Affairs has been understaffed," Porter said finally. "I'm sure you'll get things moving again." "That's the plan," Danielle replied. "See you at 2:30. After hanging up, Danielle decided it was time to take a more direct approach. She left her office and walked down to the records department. The clerk on duty was a middle-aged woman named Betty Wilson, who had worked for the department for over 20 years. "I need to see all video footage from downtown patrol cars for Friday night," Danielle told her. Betty looked surprised. "That's a lot of footage. Any particular time or area?" "Around midnight. Near the Blue Note Jazz Club and the public parking lot on Maple Street. Betty typed something into her computer. That would be Officers Patterson and Kelly on patrol in that area at that time, she said. Do you want their body cam footage too? Yes, please, Danielle said, trying to hide her excitement. She hadn't expected it to be this easy. Betty frowned at her screen. That's odd. Their footage for Friday night isn't here. The system shows they were on duty, but there's no uploaded video from either their patrol car or body cams. Is that unusual? Danielle asked. It happens sometimes, Betty said with a shrug. Technical glitches. Or sometimes officers forget to turn on their cameras. Or they turn them off on purpose, Danielle thought. Can you check if there's any footage from other patrol cars in that area? Maybe Officers Rivera and Diaz? Betty searched again. Yes, they responded to a call at 12:17 a.m. on Maple Street. Their footage is available. I'd like to see it, please. Betty. Set Danielle up in a small viewing room with a computer. The footage from Officers Rivera and Diaz's patrol car showed them arriving at the scene. Danielle could see herself sitting on the ground, touching her injured face. Andre Lewis was beside her. A small crowd of people stood around, many with phones out recording everything. The body cam footage from Officer Rivera was even more useful. It clearly showed Danielle's injury. It also recorded statements from witnesses who described seeing Officer Patterson hit her. Danielle made copies of all this footage and saved it to a secure drive. This was solid evidence, but she needed more. She spent the next hour calling businesses near where the incident had happened. Many were closed on Friday night, but a few had security cameras that might have captured what happened. The convenience store on the corner and a bank across the street both agreed to provide their footage to her. By noon, Danielle had collected video from 3 different angles, all showing the same thing. Officer Patterson striking her across the face after she asked for his badge number. The footage also showed how Patterson and Kelly had treated Andre, pushing him against the wall for no apparent reason. Danielle called Andre. I have video evidence of what happened Friday night, she told him. Would you be willing to give an official statement? Official statement to who? Andre asked, sounding suspicious. To me, Danielle said. I'm not a journalist, Andre. I'm the new chief of internal affairs for the Riverside Police Department. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You're what? Andre finally said. My official announcement is this afternoon, but I've been working quietly for the past week. What happened Friday night? That was me experiencing firsthand what you and others have been dealing with. And now you're going to do something about it? Andre didn't sound convinced. Yes, Danielle said firmly, but I need your help. Your statement combined with the video evidence will make a strong case. After thinking it over, Andre agreed to come to her office that afternoon to give his statement. While waiting for him, Danielle continued her investigation. She pulled the personnel files for Officers Patterson and Kelly. What she found was disturbing but not surprising. Both officers had been with the department for over 10 years. Both had multiple complaints against them, and both had been protected by their supervisors and the previous internal affairs staff. Notes in their files showed a pattern of excuses and cover-ups. When Andre arrived, Danielle recorded his statement about Friday night and his previous experiences with the Riverside Police. His account was clear and detailed. He described how Officers Patterson and Kelly had stopped him for no reason, refused to listen when he explained he was coming from work, and used unnecessary force. Has this happened to other people you know? Danielle asked. Andre nodded. Many of my friends and co-workers. It's why some of them have left Riverside. They got tired of being treated like criminals in their own city. After Andre left, Danielle had just enough time to prepare for her meeting with Chief Rogers and the press conference. She gathered her evidence into a secure folder and locked it in her desk. She would need it soon, but not today. Today was about introducing herself to the department and the public. She was just about to leave her office when she heard voices in the hallway. Curious, she moved closer to her door to listen. I'm telling you, she's trouble, a man was saying. Danielle recognized the voice as Officer Patterson's. She's been asking questions, looking at old complaints. Relax, another voice said. This one belonged to Lieutenant Frank Miller, Patterson's direct supervisor. She's new. They always come in thinking they're going to change everything, but she'll learn how things work around here. She better, Patterson said. Or we'll have to teach her, like we taught that nosy lady the other night. Danielle's heart beat faster as she heard Patterson laugh about the incident. He had no idea that the nosy lady he had hit was about to become his boss. The voices moved away, and Danielle let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The confrontation with Patterson and Kelly would come soon enough, but first she needed to understand how deep the problems went in this department. She left her office and walked to Chief Rogers' office for their meeting. The chief was a tall man in his late 50s with gray hair and a serious expression. He had been running the Riverside Police Department for 12 years. "Ms. Washington," he said, shaking her hand, "welcome to the team. I trust you're settling in well." "I am," Danielle said. "I've been reviewing files and getting to know the department." "Good, good." Chief Rogers gestured for her to sit down. "I want to be clear about something before we go out there for the announcement. Internal affairs is an important part of this department, but it works best when it works with us, not against us." "I agree," Danielle said carefully. "We all want the same thing, a police department that serves and protects all citizens of Riverside." Chief Rogers nodded. "Exactly, but policing is difficult work. Our officers face dangers and make split-second decisions every day. We need to support them, not second-guess them." Danielle understood what he was really saying. He wanted her to look the other way, to protect officers even when they were wrong, just like the previous internal affairs chiefs had done. "I believe in accountability," Danielle said. "It protects both the public and the good officers who do their jobs properly." The chief's smile became tight. "Well, we can discuss your approach in more detail later. For now, let's focus on introducing you to the department and the press." As they walked to the conference room where the announcement would be made, Danielle thought about everything she had learned in the past week. The corruption in this department wasn't limited to a few bad officers. It was a system that protected those officers and ignored the people they hurt. Changing that system wouldn't be easy. But as Danielle prepared to step into the spotlight, she knew it was necessary, and she had the evidence to start the process. Patterson and Kelly didn't know it yet, but their days of operating without consequences were about to end. 1 week had passed since the official announcement of Danielle Washington as the new Chief of Internal Affairs. During that week, she had continued gathering evidence while keeping her identity as the woman Officer Patterson had struck a secret. The bruises on her face had faded enough that with makeup, most people couldn't tell she had been injured. Today was the day Danielle had been planning for. She had called a meeting of the entire command staff and many patrol officers, including Patterson and Kelly. They were told it was a briefing on new department policies. But Danielle had something very different in mind. She arrived at the large conference room early to set up. She connected her laptop to the projector and tested the video files she had collected. Everything was ready. Now she just needed to wait for everyone to arrive. The room filled quickly. Chief Rogers sat in the front row with his deputy chiefs. Lieutenant Miller was there along with other supervisors. And near the back, looking bored and annoyed, were officers Patterson and Kelly. At exactly 10 a.m., Danielle stood up and walked to the podium. The room fell quiet as she looked out at the assembled officers. "Good morning," she began. "Thank you all for being here. As you know, I'm Danielle Washington, your new Chief of Internal Affairs. I've spent the past 2 weeks learning about this department, its strengths and its weaknesses." She paused, looking directly at Patterson. He showed no sign of recognizing her. "I believe in accountability," Danielle continued. "I believe that good police work requires trust between officers and the communities they serve. When that trust is broken, it must be rebuilt, and that starts with honesty and transparency." Chief Rogers shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He clearly didn't like where this was going. "Before I outline the new policies and procedures for internal affairs, I want to share a personal experience with you all." Danielle reached up and slowly wiped away the concealer covering the last of her bruising. The cut above her eye was still visible, though the stitches had been removed. 10 days ago, I was assaulted by a police officer right here in Riverside. A murmur ran through the room. Officers looked at each other in confusion. I was walking to my car after visiting a jazz club downtown. I witnessed 2 officers detaining a young man who had done nothing wrong. When I asked for their badge numbers, one of the officers struck me across the face, knocking me to the ground. Now people were really paying attention. Danielle saw Patterson sit up straighter, a look of dawning horror on his face as he began to recognize her. I filed a complaint as a private citizen. That complaint, like so many others in this department, was ignored. It was never entered into the system. It was placed at the bottom of a pile on a desk, where it would likely never be seen again. Danielle clicked a button on her laptop, and the first video began to play on the large screen behind her. It showed the incident from the bank's security camera. Officers Patterson and Kelly pushing Andre against the wall, Danielle approaching, and then Patterson striking her. The room was completely silent now. Every eye was fixed on the screen. "This is not an isolated incident," Danielle said when the video ended. "Officers Patterson and Kelly have a long history of complaints against them. None of those complaints were properly investigated. None led to any disciplinary action." She clicked to show a chart of complaints filed against the 2 officers over the past 3 years. This pattern of behavior was allowed to continue because this department failed in its duty to police itself. Supervisors looked the other way. Internal affairs failed to investigate, and the people of Riverside suffered. Lieutenant Miller stood up. "This is outrageous. You can't ambush officers like this in a public meeting. There are procedures." "Yes, there are procedures." Danielle cut him off. "Procedures that you and others in this room have ignored for years. I have evidence that you personally buried at least 12 complaints against Officer Patterson." Miller's face turned red. He sat back down without another word. Chief Rogers stood up next. "Ms. Washington, I think we should continue this discussion in private." "No," Danielle said firmly. "That's exactly the problem, Chief. Too much has happened in private, behind closed doors. It's time for transparency." She turned back to face the entire room. "As of this moment, Officers Gregory Patterson and Vincent Kelly are suspended without pay pending a full investigation of all complaints against them. Lieutenant Frank Miller is also suspended for his role in covering up these complaints." Patterson jumped to his feet. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority." "Actually, I do," Danielle replied calmly. "The mayor and the governor's task force have given me full authority to clean up this department, and that's exactly what I intend to do." She clicked to the next slide, which showed Andre Lewis in his nurse's uniform at the hospital. "This is Andre Lewis. He's a registered nurse at Riverside General Hospital. He was one of many black citizens targeted by Officers Patterson and Kelly for no reason other than the color of his skin. He has filed 3 separate complaints. All were ignored." Danielle continued through her presentation, showing evidence of a pattern of racial profiling and excessive force. She showed statistics on how complaints were handled differently depending on the race of the person filing them. "This ends today," Danielle said. "I am implementing a new system for handling complaints. Every complaint will be logged in the system within 24 hours. Every complaint will be investigated. Body cameras will be worn by all officers and must remain on during all interactions with the public." Some of the officers in the room looked angry. Others looked ashamed. A few nodded in agreement with what Danielle was saying. "I know that most of you are good officers," Danielle continued, her voice softening slightly. "You joined the force to protect and serve. You do your jobs with honor and respect for all citizens. I'm not here to make your jobs harder. I'm here to restore trust between this department and the community." She walked out from behind the podium, standing directly in front of the assembled officers. "The people of Riverside deserve a police department they can trust, and the good officers in this room deserve to work in a department that upholds the highest standards. Together we can build that department." Patterson, still standing, pointed at Danielle. "You set me up. You pretended to be some random person on the street." "No, Officer Patterson," Danielle replied. "You revealed who you really are when you thought no one who mattered was watching. You showed your true character when you struck a woman who had done nothing wrong except ask for your badge number." The room was silent as everyone watched this exchange. "I didn't know who you were," Patterson said, his voice lower now. "That's the point," Danielle said. "You shouldn't treat anyone that way regardless of who they are. A badge isn't a license to abuse power. It's a responsibility to use that power wisely and justly." Chief Rogers stepped forward. "I think we've all heard enough for today. Officers, you're dismissed. Command staff, please remain for further discussion." As the room began to clear out, Danielle noticed that many officers were avoiding Patterson and Kelly. No one wanted to be associated with them now. The blue wall of silence was beginning to crack. After everyone else had left, Danielle faced Chief Rogers and the remaining command staff. "This is just the beginning," she told them. "Every complaint will be reviewed. Every officer will be held to the same standard. And any supervisor who has covered up misconduct will be held accountable. You're going to tear this department apart," Chief Rogers said. "No," Danielle replied. "I'm going to rebuild it, better and stronger than before. The question is whether you want to be part of that process or not." She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. "I have meetings scheduled with each of you over the next week to discuss the new procedures. I expect your full cooperation." As Danielle walked back to her office, she felt both tired and energized. The confrontation had gone better than she expected. Some officers had actually thanked her as they left the room. They were tired of the bad behavior making all of them look bad. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Mayor Coleman. "How did it go?" Danielle replied, "First steps taken. Long way to go." She sat down at her desk and looked at the stack of files waiting for her review. The work was just beginning. Changing a culture wouldn't happen overnight. There would be resistance and setbacks, but as Danielle touched the healing cut above her eye, she knew this was work worth doing. For Andre Lewis. For all the people who had filed complaints that disappeared into desk drawers. For the good officers who wanted to serve their community with honor. And for herself. The woman who had been knocked down on a sidewalk but had gotten back up stronger and more determined than ever. Danielle Washington opened the first file and began to read. The reckoning had begun, and she was ready.